Prabhu. Good morning from Bhakti Yoga Retreat. We're here in person with dear Govinda Prabhu, Narayan Prabhu, Malini, Devi Prabhu. We have Ashwani, Len Cohen, Fayen, Prabhupada's house, Lakshmi Priya, Sarah, and Rukmini. And today we're gonna continue reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, 8th chapter, third verse, chapter 8. The chapter is called Questions by King Parikshit. And just before we gonna recite the Sanskrit verse, let's invoke auspiciousness together by singing the Srimad Bhagavatam invocation mantra. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Shri Vataha Shradaya Nityam. Oh, sorry, that's fourth. We're in text 3, right?
Yes.
Text 3. Sorry, so this is text 3. Katyasva Mahabhaga Yata Aham Akilatmani Krishne Nivishya Nehi Sagnam Manaha Tyakshe Kalevaram Katasya Mahabhaga Yataham Akilatmani Krishne Niveshya Nehi Sangam Manastyaksheya Kalevaram Katayasva Mahabhaga Yataham Akilatmani Krishne Niveshya Nehi Sangam Manastyakshe Kalevaram Katyayasva Mahabhaga Yataham Akilatmani Krishne Niveshya Nehi Sangam Manastyakshe Kalevaram. Anyone like to chant verse?
Katyasva Mahabhaga Yataham Akilatmani Krishne Niveshani Sangam Manastyakshe Kalevaram
Katyasva Mahabhaga Yataham Akilatmani Krishne Niveshyani Sangam Manastyakshe Kalevaram
Katyasva Mahabhaga Yataham Akilatmani Krishne Niveshyani Sangam Manastyakshe Kalevaram
Manasya Kalevaram.
Does anyone online would like to chant?
Kataya sva mahatvaga
Katayasya mahabhaga
yataham akilatmani
Makilatmani
Krishna diveshani shangam
Krishna Niveshani Shangam
manas chakshe kalevaram.
Namaste Kalevaram.
Katayasva.
Katayasva.
Please continue speaking.
Please continue speaking.
Mahabhaga.
Mahabhaga.
O greatly fortunate one.
O greatly fortunate one.
Yata.
Yata.
As much as.
Aham.
Aham. I. Akilat Mani.
Akila Atmani.
Unto the Supreme Soul.
Unto the Supreme Soul.
Krishna.
Krishna,
Unto Lord Krishna.
unto Lord Shri Krishna,
Niveshyasya.
Nivesha,
Having placed.
Having placed.
Nehi Sangam.
Nisangam,
Being freed from material qualities.
Being free from material qualities.
Manaha.
Mana,
Mind.
mind,
Tyakshe.
Chakshe.
May relinquish.
May relinquish.
Kalevaram.
Kalevaram,
Body.
body.
Translation. O greatly fortunate Shukadeva Goswami, please continue narrating Srimad Bhagavatam so that I can place my mind upon the Supreme Soul, Lord Krishna, and being completely freed from material qualities, thus relinquish this body. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. To be fully engaged in hearing the transcendental narration described in the text of Srimad Bhagavatam means to constantly associate with the Supreme Soul, Shri Krishna, and to constantly associate with the Supreme Lord Krishna means to be liberated from the qualities of matter. Lord Krishna is like the sun, and material contamination is like darkness. As the presence of the sun dissipates darkness, constant engagement in the association of the Lord Shri Krishna frees one from the contamination of the material qualities. Contamination by the material qualities is the cause of repeated birth and death, and liberation from material qualities is the transcendence. Maharaj Parikshit was now a realized soul by the secret of liberation through the grace of Shukadeva Goswami. For the letter he had informed the king that the highest perfection of life is to be in remembrance of Narayan at the end of life. Maharaj Parikshit was destined to give up his body at the end of 7 days, and thus he decided to continue remembering the Lord by his association with the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, and thus to quit his body in full consciousness of the presence of the Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Soul. The hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam performed by the professional man is different from the transcendental hearing of Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit was a soul realized in the absolute truth, Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The fruitive materialist is not a realized soul. He wants to derive some material benefit from his so-called hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. Undoubtedly, such an audience hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the professional man can derive some material benefit as they desire, but that does not mean that such a pretense of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam for a week is as good as the hearing of Maharaj Parikshit. It is the duty of the saint to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from the self-realized soul and not be duped by professional men. One should continue such hearing till the end of one's life, so that one can actually have the transcendental association of the Lord and thus be liberated simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj Parikshit had already given up all his connections with his kingdom and family, the most attractive features of materialism, but still he was conscious of his material body. He wanted to be free of such bondage also by the constant association of the Lord. Om Agyantarenandasyam Gyanashala Shalakaya Chakshu Namanitayena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance when my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, kindly opened my darkened eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances to His lotus feet. O greatly fortunate Shukadev Goswami, please continue narrating Srimad Bhagavatam so that I can place my mind upon the Supreme Soul, Lord Krishna, and being completely freed from material qualities, thus relinquish this body. Hare Krishna. So it's been quite a while since I gave a class, at least in this forum, something like half a year, probably even more, since my advanced course. And I mean, I kept giving classes in different forums, either through like a few months ago, I started a book club around the Bhagavad Gita on my YouTube channel to my supporters. So I was getting some of that interaction that I really missed there. But this is really something that I think I supposed to do to some extent. And as Krishna says, although a duty that if we do, better to do our own job imperfectly than to do someone else's job perfectly. And I'm aware of different shortcomings that I got exposed to after my advanced course, and I think that's kind of really blocked me from continuing doing that service. So I'm happy to get back to that and continue. And interestingly enough, yesterday in this book club reading that I started, we finished the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, and at the end of the introduction, Prabhupada sort of trying to convince us, like, read the Vedic literatures, read the Bhagavad Gita, read the Upanishads, and cleanse and absorb the mind in the narrations about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And why is that? Why should we do it, or why do we have to do it, or why is it beneficial for us? And he expresses there, yam yam vapi smaran bhavan, that everything that we think about by the time of death, whatever the consciousness, the mind is absorbed. The mind, the subtle body takes the soul in the capsule of the subtle body to its next destination, which is according to that consciousness. Just like maybe some of you have the experience of, before we fall asleep, if we think about, I don't know, how do I make the, mung dal halwa, whatever, then I end up in the mung dal halwa loka and I eat all kinds of sweets, and that would be nice. But many times the mind is, especially in this quiet, still moments that we alone, right? The fraction of time we have before we fall asleep, all the infatuating and difficult things many times comes up, and if we don't remember really the only person that's gonna help us in these moments, then our situation is very, very perplexed. And this is the story of Maharaj Parikshit, right? He, from the beginning of his birth, even before his birth, he was exposed to the Brahmastra, the sophisticated nuclear weapon. The new nuclear weapon that we know about is destined to kill everything, everywhere that it falls. But the Brahmastra is sophisticated in the sense that it's specifically targeted usually to a certain particular part of the population. So who dropped the Brahmastra? I forgot. Ashvatam, right? Ashvatam. He wanted to to make sure that they're not going to be any descendant of the Pandavas that will inherit the kingdom. So he released the Brahmashtra specifically for towards the men of that were present in the battlefield. And Maharaj Parikshit was in danger, and in the womb he met Krishna, because Krishna came and protected him, and since then he is constantly looking for Krishna. I think this is the meaning of the word Maharaj Parikshit. Parikshit means one who is looking for Krishna. And as soon as he came out of the womb, immediately he was started wondering and questioning, who is Krishna? Where is Krishna? Where I can meet that person who saved me. And the end of his life, as the beginning of his life, is also around the same topic. How would he absorb his mind completely in the pastime of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his qualities, his philosophy too, his all his different devotees. Basically, this is the theme of the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a lot of dense philosophy that we went through in the first canto. The science of how to approach a spiritual how to approach spiritual life is explained there. How to question. I remember one interesting thing that Prabhupada mentions there, that the spiritual master, although he put towards the disciple who put forward so many questions, the spiritual master is not obliged to answer any of them, all of them, or any of them, or even in a particular order. He might choose his own way how to answer, because the spiritual master is concerned with the spiritual evolution of his disciple. And sometimes it might seem very random and like maybe not related even. Like there are conversations with Prabhupada that they would ask something, they would ask Prabhupada a certain question, and Prabhupada seemingly will not understand what they asked, or he would answer like in a completely different way. And the disciples would even try to correct him, like, no, Prabhupada, they meant that. Prabhupada knows very well what they meant, but his answers sometimes will not correspond, or all the answers of the spiritual master will not correspond, because it addresses a much deeper and a tactful issue in our spiritual development. And now Maharaj Parikshit is requesting to continue this process of the questioning of different different pastimes of Krishna, and he submits to his spiritual master Shukadeva Goswami to go forward with that. Yeah, it's something that I remember around this stress of reading the Vedic literatures, specifically reading the books that Srila Prabhupada left for us. He left over 80 volumes of books, and it's very overwhelming. Like even I read once. I was fortunate enough to read once all his books. Still, I feel that there are very little that I remember and want to speak that I assimilated. And sometimes I see that Prabhupada would stress the chanting, for example, that the chanting is really why we read the books, and to improve the quality of our chanting. So the question is like, really, why should we read, or why should we attempt to read all of Prabhupada's books, or even any of Prabhupada's books, And an answer that I got from one devotee who left his body, I think few months ago. He mentioned how Prabhupada answered him the very same question, saying that to convince us of the chanting, to convince us of the process of chanting, and to absorb the mind in more and more chanting, because really this is a perfection, that we chant and hear, and we enjoy the process, and we enjoy others taking up to the process. But because the mind is filled up with so many doubts and so many obstacles that we basically inherited from either our society or our family or our country. The mind needs to be battled, and the chanting too. Chanting, I think Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati says, you beat the mind, but you beat the mind in the morning. Yeah, you beat the mind with shoes in the morning, and with the broomstick in the evening. Be a bit more gentle just before you go to sleep, but still, the chanting is for that reason, to really face that mind, and to help face the mind. It's very beneficial to have this association with Prabhupada, with Krishna, through his books, through his narrations, to give us all the counter argument that, like I said, that we inherited from our psychophysical nature. And Maharaj Parikshit, in the last paragraph, he asks to really go to the depth of his subconscious attachment to his material body, and really free himself from everything. He already gave up his kingdom. He gave up his palace, his opulence, and he chose to sit down. And still, he sensed that he is subtly attractive to different features of the material world, and he wishes to really take it to another level, and go to how Prabhupada, I think he says here, free from where is it? Maharaj Parikshit had already given up all his connections from his kingdom and family, the most attractive features of materialism, but still he was conscious of his material body. He wanted to be free of such bondage also by the constant association of the Lord. So he completely wants to spiritualize his body. That's what I get from it. Yeah, I feel somewhat blocked to continue, but this is, I guess, part of my process today. And if anyone would like to share or ask questions, we can do it a bit earlier than usual. But yeah.
I appreciate you mentioned that Prabhupada's response. We read his books. Hare Krishna. We read Prabhupada's books to convince us about the chanting, and that I have that experience. When I'm reading Prabhupada's books, I'm reminded of what I forgot just an hour before. Mm-hmm. And then also I find it important that the principle of that in reading Prabhupada's books, that is the goal in itself, apart from what else it reminds us of. But it is just like chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It's a process, and it's the goal in itself. We've achieved the goal by chanting, and also we're taking steps towards the goal. The journey is the goal in chanting. And it's the same with reading Prabhupada's books. We spend 5 minutes reading Prabhupada's books. Right now we just read a verse from the second canto. That's it. We are achieving the goal of the spirit soul. And also by achieving that goal, then it's like a rising tide that lifts all ships. Also inspired, like, yeah, let me chant extra rounds, let my japa be more attentive, and let me rise early and offer obeisances with consciousness. So like the rising tide lifts all ships. So I appreciate that. Yeah, by chanting, we're reminded, by reading transcendental literature from Srila Prabhupada, we're reminded of other integral parts of the process, other pillars of the process, chanting Hare Krishna. And also, it's the goal in itself, apart from what it leads to.
Mm. Thank you, dear Govinda Prabhu, for highlighting that. And I remember too, like personally, when I was like in a very rigid sadhana around reading Prabhupada's books, even when I wasn't attentive when I was chanting, which was very rare to experience any really high level of attentiveness. But what would happen to me there, because I was so absorbed in reading the books, instead of thinking about gross materialism, I would remember purports, or I'd remember verses. It will really come from the subconscious, this association with these divine literatures. And that's kind of where I connect to hope that by the time of death, like if I make enough of an endeavor to absorb my mind in reading Prabhupada's books again, or twice or thrice, it will just burst from the subconscious, and Krishna will help like that if I make an endeavor. But yeah, it's very challenging with all the different changes I experienced in the last 2 years since I left my comfortable zone and in the ashram of having no, I remember when you visited me, you asked me about do you have the internet there installed, and I didn't have, because I was just sitting and reading Prabhupada's books for 4 or 5 hours a day. It would not even come to my mind, why do I need the internet? It's such a botheration. If anyone wants me to serve them, they can come here. And everything was in person, and everything was very very comfortable for my spiritual emancipation. But yeah, I took some challenges on myself, and honestly saying, I'm barely handling them, but I think it's beneficial too in my process, in the sense of finding a more deeper grounding hold of my attachment to Prabhupada and to his association, and like-minded association, and the process.
Yeah, I find it very important for myself, because I'm inspired by the groups you're running, by the Gita group and like that. And so we're also involved in, we facilitate a Bhagavad Gita course, we participate in a Chaitanya Charitamrita group, and here we're on second canto of Bhagavatam, and I'm reading through Prabhupada's pre-1965 back to Godheads.
Mm.
And I find it very important for my spiritual life, for maintaining my consciousness, for gradually, step by step, progressing in stages of consciousness, that like whatever else is happening, that I'm proactively involved in a regular program of reading, I'll call it Prabhupada's, the primary books he gave us as part of my personal reading, apart from any courses or preparing for classes. And that's great to study Prabhupada's books. Printed copy or on the internet to prepare for Chaitanya Charitamrita group or to prepare to give Gita course, Bhagavatam, that's wonderful. And that like separate from that, this is it's important for me, for my consciousness, that part of my sadhana is I'm just going around and around Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, Krishna book, Ishopanishad. And just so just want to share with you that for me that's vital for my maintaining and deepening enthusiasm for spiritual life.
Yeah, your personal time.
Personal reading. Yeah.
Personal time with Prabhupada, reading his books, regardless of other interactions. It's very vital in your process, and I can see how that would be vital in my process and perhaps others too. And yeah, maybe that's the reason why I feel a bit personally, spiritually drained in the last few months. Yeah.
Ramachandra, can I ask what has kept you going through the time of being drained?
Ooh. What kept me going even though I was completely drained? I think it's mainly the commitment that I made to Prabhupada in 2014 when I took the formal initiation. I vowed to, sacrifice this lifetime for the process, and I think that's one of the main reasons. Prabhupada sometimes actually even says that after some time, if you don't take that vow, it's more likely that we're just gonna leave the path, the process, and I can see how personally in my spiritual path it really played a role. I think if I would not take that vow in 2014, I'll probably just go somewhere else.
You might be doing something completely different.
I probably would, because my mind is so like, I can change like everything in like whatever in a day or two. But this the name giving ceremony and the vow that I made, I would just feel too, I think that I'm like disappointing Prabhupada. Of course he's not disappointed. Ultimately he knows that sooner or later we're all going to come back, but I think I always considered something very special about this, of like I've spent so many lifetimes and trying to endeavor for all kind of goals and be a tattoo artist or be a whatever musician or be an art, like another type of artist. And I thought before the initiation, okay, let me gamble this life and put my life on Prabhupada's feet and see what happens. And I think if I would not give that vow back then, I would sort of just fade away, and so that gave me a lot of strength. And I think that's Prabhupada. That's part of my personal relationship with Prabhupada and Krishna, that I feel that they sensed some sincerity in this formal acceptance that I made, and they giving me some strength to somehow or other continue chanting my rounds, continue assisting me in, getting back on the sadhana, getting back on waking up early, getting back on, not putting myself down because I find myself, find some material shortcomings, so yeah, I think it's that vow. It's very, very powerful. And I heard that in 222, right? There is another ceremony coming up.
We're planning.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I encourage anyone who is thinking about it to really think about it, because it's not just, of course, it's a formality, but at the same time, it's not just a formality. It's in a sense just like the deity worship, right? Deity worship can be seen as like very formal and external, but no, this is the vital force of our purification process. Prabhupada explains, I think that's what, fourth canto, Pancharatrika Vidhi and Bhagavat Vidhi. And Bhagavat Vidhi, right, what we do today, the process of discussing and reading the Srimad Bhagavatam is the life and soul of our Diksha, of our initiation. But to preserve our purity and preserve our integrity, Pancharatrika Vidhi is all very, very necessary. And Pancharatrika Vidhi is deity worship and initiation too, in a sense. We're trying to purify the body in this way. So it's very vital, and I found it very very encouraging in my process. Hare Krishna.
I appreciate your response. I appreciate Sarah's question and your response. I wasn't sure where you were going to go with your response, and I'm very moved by where you went. That because in our community, we tend to not go where you just went. And so I'm glad you went there, because because the process of initiation, the essence is Divya Gyan. The essence isn't about some external formality. And the essence is that we receive transformational, transcendental knowledge from Srila Prabhupada, and we qualify ourselves to receive it by serving by hearing and chanting, serving by chanting japa, serving by morning program, serving by distributing books, reading his books, and that's the essence, and the transcendental transformational knowledge. And at the same time, the commitment as part of the formal initiation, the formal aspect of the process, that's also transcendental. It's also powerful. Prabhupada also instituted it and recommended it for those who are sincere. And I'm hearing in and it's true for me too. If I think back to 1985, my formal initiation. It's external like that. But external doesn't mean shallow or superficial. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing for you, it's been life-saving.
Yeah.
And, we can parallel to like in, let's say, like a Satvatove seminars. Many here have experienced Satvatove seminars. So in one of the seminars, there's in many of the seminars, there's a commitment. Mm-hmm. Like we say, if you want to take the seminar, you need to commit to complete the seminar, attend the whole thing, right? There's no coming and going. And then we say, because it's true, that most people, at least for some of the seminars, mm-hmm. most people, there's some time during those 3 days, 6 days, 7 days, where it's just like, okay, that's want to leave. I've had enough. I want to leave. But not you. But right. But I made a commitment. But I made a commitment, and I made a commitment, so I'm staying, and then that keeps you in the game. It keeps you in the crucible. Keeps you in the process of purification. Human life is meant for purification, and if we have escape hatches, because purification means like it's uncomfortable, it could be painful, like that, and we have escape hatches, then we won't get the purification that we're here for in this lifetime. And so in that ultimate seminar, you committed to Srila Prabhupada. You committed to Srila Prabhupada. And so you know, based on your psychophysical nature and whatever, there'd be times over the past 6-7 years you wanted to leave. But it's just like this personal commitment to Srila Prabhupada.
Specifically in the last 6 months. Since
Since
I took the advanced course.
Okay. Okay. We won't go into that whole analysis at this time. We'll just talk principle and philosophy here. So, yes, yeah, but then yes, you made this personal commitment, so that's kept you in the game. You know, whatever happiness or distress, whatever waves of the material mind and energy. So that commitment, and then it's there, kind of like, well, if I am committed to this process, to following Srila Prabhupada and serving his mission, why not officially commit to it? I mean, there's that, there's that question too. So I'm inspired by your response, and it's very personal, and it really gets to an aspect of the philosophy we don't so much emphasize. So I appreciate your one thing.
Thank you for highlighting the personal thread there. I was really touched.
Hi, Krishna Rama.
Hare Krishna, Masuya.
I'm enjoying your class and your vulnerability and sharing and bringing me back to memories of our advanced course together. So thank you for bringing that all back vividly. And with Dear Govinda's sharing with preparing for the advanced course. I feel like it's preparing for advanced course for Prabhupada for initiation. And it seems like, in the excitement of preparing for initiation for Prabhupada, deeply committed and doing my studies and being very joyful. And what I'm struggling with is making that personal promise to Prabhupada, and that agreement between he and I is, it's like almost like if I'm breaking a personal commitment to myself. So it's, I feel like when there's a living entity in front of me, I'm more easily attracted to keep that commitment. And when there's separation, just through his Vani, I'm not as easily as reminded. So I'm appreciating that you're giving me a time to reflect upon my personal relationship with Prabhupada. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to share that touches my heart and makes me want to recommit again and again.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing how it's a perpetual commitment that we all the time learning to commit over and over again and choose to be with Prabhupada and reflecting on your personal process doing that. It's very inspiring for myself too. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And thank you for coming to Kirtan yesterday. I just wanted to share with everyone who wasn't there in person that Rukmini was leading, and there was a spirit soul in a young boy's body that was very attracted and came. And within minutes, he said, "I am so sorry, I have to leave. I have to go get my friend." And he ran. Oh my gosh, he ran so quickly like the wind. And it was a very long field he had to run to and into the woods. and he got his friend, and they both ran back and they joined us, and it was so magical and so beautiful. And so to me, that's what fills my heart too, is to see how spirit souls are so attracted to the holy name. And so I appreciate bringing that vibration to Possum Creek Park yesterday. So thank you for your association and your musical talents there that brought these spirit souls to us.
Yeah, that was a very, very potent kirtan that we did all together. Hare Krishna.
Jai Harinam Sankirtan Ki.
Jai.
Very auspicious.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hello. I'm kind of curious, and I also feel confused about something. So you said that you feel spiritually drained, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm curious about that, and also kind of a bit confused, because yesterday in the class, what I got from it is that, like, spiritually, we can only ever kind of fill up in a way. And now I'm kind of in this question of, well, how is it possible to be drained? And is it that maybe you're materially drained and not connected to the spiritual? I don't know. This is just a question that is arising in me at the moment, and I'd love you or someone to speak to that.
Yeah, thank you about pointing it out. That philosophically too, actually, I mean, I understand that we cannot be spiritually drained, because we are part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit, who is, in constant touch with us, even if we don't want to be in touch with him. But yeah, I guess my experience of being spiritually drained is because I perceive some I'm resenting that connection with the Supreme Spirit. So I feel like I'm, trying to drain myself. But yeah, I'm grateful for you pointing it out. It makes me look more deeper into why am I feeling like that? Why am I feeling inadequate or out of enthusiasm in my spiritual life at this point?
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, like, the Prabhupada makes the point that we're always connected with Krishna. We're always connected with Super Soul. And conditioned life means I forget that I'm connected. Because sometimes you say, I'm disconnected from Super Soul, I'm disconnected from Krishna, I'm disconnected from Prabhupada. But actually, we're always connected, and we forget that we're connected. Just like someone in a dream is connected with the room and the furniture, the actual room and people in the room, but in sleeping condition, he or she forgets that they're connected. So simply, when I indulge mentally or physically in sense gratification, then I forget my identity as a spirit soul, and I become dull-minded, and I experience being drained when I indulge in sense gratification. When we can all define what sense gratification is for each of us. So when I indulge in sense gratification, which is different than experiencing sense gratification in the natural course of devotional service. Okay. And so in the natural course of devotional service, senses, like this morning we danced for Guru Puja. So that was sense gratification, but I'm not drained, I'm enlivened. But when I indulge in sense gratification, that's not a natural part of my devotional service. Maybe too many donuts, for example. Maybe sleeping late, where I didn't need all that sleep. Yeah, then I feel I experience spiritual draining, and I experience heaviness. I experience lack of enthusiasm, and then the process is to somehow or other connect back with the process. Read a verse in Bhagavad Gita, chant one Hare Krishna mantra, go to the altar and offer obeisances with some spark of sincerity to Srila Prabhupada, and then I get to transform the downward spiral to the upward spiral. So I don't know, I just something I wanted to share that just personally when I indulge in mental or physical sense gratification, then I experience spirit. I experience lack of enthusiasm for spiritual life.
It's like losing the test. It seems that the test for spiritual activities is very fragile. And then part of our responsibility is to protect that test. And so many things are going against that test. And sometimes I'm thinking about like dieting, like let's say if I do 3 days with raw food, then I love raw food. It's just like raw food tastes so good, it's wonderful and all that. But then let's say the 4th days or the 5th days, I start eating like flour, white sugar, or anything that's kind of seems to taste better, but in fact doesn't. Then after like the raw food or the healthy food doesn't taste, it's draining. Like I'm drained. I don't want to eat that. I want to eat the donuts, like you said.
Yeah,
I want to eat the pizza.
blind.
I want to eat the junk food, and I don't want to eat the healthy food. And so, like the protection is like, okay, well, I know that, so let me not eat, not even start eating the junk food. Let me really be vigilant about every aspect of my spiritual life to keep going with enthusiasm and keep the test there. Because like that slippery slope is happening so easily with, sometimes even in a subtle way without, my awareness. Like, yesterday I looked at a documentary about a tribe of nomads in Nepal. For example, I was tired, I was a little sick, and that came up. So I said, oh, I'm going to watch that. I said, oh, it's in India, Nepal.
Pretty close.
It's pretty close.
Maybe you're going to see Krishna there?
Yeah, maybe there's Krishna there. Anyway, rational. But I could see after that, I didn't have the test to do anything else but trying to numb myself in front of the screen. And it was just like so insidious because, it was not like gross and codification. There was nothing there that seems sinful or anything. It was just tribes and tribal life. And I really felt that drainage. I felt drained. I felt like I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to chant. I didn't want. And then I pushed myself, and then I read Bhagavad Gita for our course. And within half an hour, like I was like, wow, I'm really happy. That's what I'm doing. Yeah. But it needed a push. It was not through attraction of test. Yeah. Yeah, because like I get that your senses became somewhat blunt. Your spiritual senses became blunt because of that association. And yeah, I think there is a verse like that, right? Like Atashi Krishna Nama Dir Naba Ved Kriya Indiani. That the blunt senses cannot experience the bliss of spiritual life because it's very numbing. But if we make an endeavor to stimulate ourselves spiritually, although it might seem less stimulating, it's more stimulating on the long run. And we have a choice to get back to that, and Krishna is waiting for us there with all the transcendental fun. Also gulab jamun. Gulab jamun, yeah. There's 2 hands. I see
some hands up online.
Okay.
Yes.
Hands.
Well, one of them's been up, and the other one came up.
David Walker of the Arts Online.
Oh, okay. David, yes?
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind, I wanted to ask a question to dear Govinda.
Question to
Govinda. So the question is just that when you were given the class yesterday and you quoted the famous verse about before we recite this Bhagavatam, which is our means of conquest, we should offer respectful obeisance unto non-rank, reaching the supermost human being. And I know we did this a while ago, but I'm dissatisfied and I don't understand it. If he's such the supermost human being, why do we know so little about him? He's not even one of the 12 Mahajans. We don't hear anything about him. Can you explain that again for me?
I didn't hear what you said so clearly. I think you asked about Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being.
That's a pretty strong statement, supermost human being, and yet we hear virtually nothing about him.
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, and in fact, I don't have too much of a response because from Prabhupada, we don't hear too much about Narayan Rishi. And so, of course, I think when we go into the 11th canto, there is some more extensive part, and I only read the 11th canto once, more than 30 years ago. So it's a especially unusual incarnation of Krishna, Narayan Rishi. I don't know more than what Prabhupada speaks on it. What we know is that Sutta Goswami, who's the speaker of that verse, Narayanam Namaskrita, Naram Chaivadotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tatojayam Udirayat, that for Sutta Goswami, he had some special inspiration along with glorifying and appreciating and invoking the blessings of Srila Vyasadeva and Mother Sarasvati, and in that section of Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami, and Vishnu, Narayan himself. Sutta Goswami, he had some special relationship with this expansion of Krishna, Narayan Rishi, and so that's what we know for sure. That's what we know for sure. It's described, like, for example, in the 7th chapter of the 2nd canto, the 3rd chapter of the 1st canto. In each of those chapters, there are 25, 30 incarnations described. And, and so we hear something about them. Maybe there's 10 or 12 we hear a lot about, like Nrsingadev, Lord Ramachandra, Varahadev, the Vishnu incarnations. Okay. But then it makes it clear that the number of expansions, Vishnu, Tattva incarnations of Krishna, Shaktivesh incarnations, they're more numerable than the waves in the sea. And so there are so many that we hear nothing about. So Narayan Rishi, we don't hear too much about that incarnation. There is some description in the 4th canto, in the 11th canto, and it's fascinating description. So,
By the way, this morning I thought of one possible thing, that just like there's different names for Vyas, you can call him Dvaipayana Vyas, or Krishna Dvaipayana, or you could call Bhishma a different name. There's many, so maybe there's another name by which he might be known. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know, but maybe that's why we don't know him by that name, so much. Anyhow, it just came up with maybe one explanation too. Anyhow. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. There's another hand up.
Parampara Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I appreciate the open discussion, and you're leading Ramachandra. And I wanted to respond, or something that Anne shared inspired something in me to share about initiation. And I relate initiation ceremony a lot to marriage and a wedding ceremony, because that's something I'm familiar with. And I think in the West, at least, we're more familiar with marriage and wedding as that's a formal commitment ceremony, formal commitment, public thing. And so that's it's easily relatable when we think about a commitment ceremony to a spiritual master. It's like an essential part. And so I looked at what are the essential parts of a marriage and wedding ceremony and things like that. And with the marriage itself, it creates kinship. That's like the most, for me, at least, the most essential part of a wedding marriage is that it creates kinship. It's the only way to create relationship other than, to create family legally and officially, religiously. It's the only way to create relationship, a formal kinship where you become family. Otherwise, you have to be born, your blood relative. It's the only way to create non-blood relative kinship between two individuals. So for us too, it's spiritual family, creating spiritual family with the with our God brothers and God sisters and spiritual masters, the spiritual father, like that. And then another aspect of the wedding, because Mother Anasuya was saying, like, you know, having a commitment to someone else, you know, she holds herself more accountable than if it's just to herself or something like that. And so an essential part of the actual wedding ceremony is to have witnesses. And so that we think of them now as guests. We have a wedding, it's a party, and we have guests to the wedding. But really the essential part about having other people there for the wedding ceremony is that there's witnesses who see what you're doing, observe it, and then it also creates an accountability between them, that you're not just committing. First, you're committing to your wife or whoever, and you're committing to the priest that you're going to do that, and you're committing to everyone that's in attendance there and everyone who's witnessing it, that you're going to uphold that commitment. And also, there's a two-way street there where the witnesses are also they're linked there too. Where, and I think this is where like the wedding gift comes from, of like they're responsible to support your union also. They're responsible by being a witness there, by agreeing to be a witness at the wedding ceremony. They're agreeing to be accountable to your relationship too, to support your relationship. And they do that monetarily or whatever with a gift in the beginning, but it's supposed to continue on too. If you're having troubles with in your marriage, those people are supposed to be there to help you and support you. So I think that we can look at that similarly with the initiation ceremony, that when we make and for us with Mother Anasuya and us and the other initiates, that, you know, we made a commitment to Prabhupada, and we also made a commitment to each other as spiritual, you know, God brothers and God sisters, and to everyone that was in attendance there, everyone that was witnessing it. You know, it's, you know, for them to hold us accountable, and we need to be accountable to them also, because we made the commitment in the presence of all those devotees. And then, well, of course, we have, you know, Dear Govinda, Mother Malini, Mother Madhavi, Naveen Krishna Prabhu, Nalini Kanta, Ratneshwari, Teja Prakash, and his wife. There's quite a daunting list, actually, if we go down of all the commitments that we need, you know, accountability to. So I just wanted to share that. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, and maybe another 50 or 60 were there online. So in these days, there's that whole group of witnesses. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that sharing, Prabhupada, the parallel to the wedding ceremony and the function that performs with the witnesses, the commitment, and and it's one thing I can commit in my heart to Srila Prabhupada, and that's not to be taken lightly. I mean, that's essential. At the same time, we all know when in basic coaching, if we share our goals and commitments with someone else or a group, then it tends to be weightier for most of us. So that's such an important aspect. Thanks for sharing that.
I also appreciated the deep, thorough analysis of the parallels between the commitments and what makes us more purposeful in them, utilizing the seemingly external things like guests and friends to really encourage us for a purposeful living. Hare Krishna. Mother Anasuya, I think Prabhupada's house, you raised your hand. No, it's George. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you for class. I was hoping to touch base with the part of the purport that stuck out to me a little bit, and it was near the end there where he says Maharaj Parikshit had already given up all his connections with his kingdom and family, the most attractive features of materialism, but he was still conscious of his material body. And I don't know if you or anyone would like to speak about that, what stuck out to me specific, because I have no kingdom. I just have Saraswati and Danielle and my biologic family. So I was wondering if you could speak to that very materially attractive aspect of life, which is family, and how to engage with that in a way that.
Yeah, well, as far as I understand, the process of Krishna consciousness is yukta vairagya, whatever we have, we detach from that not by giving it up, but by utilizing it in God's service. And then the process of detachment, because I mean, we want it or not, we're gonna be forced to detach sooner or later from our family, our country, our identity, our own body. Then by that, in the moment that we'll be forced to detach from that, the process will be much easier because of our perpetual, constant engagement of these objects of attachment in the service of God.
I appreciate that perspective, that because we're engaging in God's service, He kind of gives us the knowledge of how to do that. I often find in the early stage of where I am, it's kind of like I know in my Christian, so that's and I know in my Christian background, everyone is always, oh, I can't wait to see my grandparents again, and you know, Uncle whatever, Uncle Sam or whoever, and when I die. And Krishna consciousness is such a departure from that. So it's kind of navigating the staying connected and trying to bring everyone, you know, like together towards God, and also not being like attached in an unhealthy way that brings us back here over and over. So I appreciate that as we make progress and as we keep reading and learning, maybe that kind of those nuances of how to navigate this would be easier. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's indeed not a denial or like a toxic attachment, but it's actually pure love because we bring everyone to the object of love and dance around him together. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And it's a classic meeting ourselves where we're at, and as a platform for steady progress towards spiritualization, Krishna consciousness. So we read yesterday, I sort of emphasized that Friction Rashi was completely fasting, and now we hear in this part of the purport that you're highlighting, Bhakti George, that he wanted to absolutely no attachment to the material body, and that's like pretty hard to conceive. My understanding is like the time of death, like sincere devotees who made so much effort to serve Krishna's mission in this life, and then the time of death can be like a time for some real quantum jumps. It's not automatic, but like real quantum jumps for completely detaching from the body.
Mm.
And so, like, following what you said, Ramachandra, there's a purport where in the Bhagavad Gita where Prabhupada emphasizes that spouse and children, these are not natural objects of affection, not to be artificially given up.
Mm.
Natural objects of affection. Put Krishna in the center, and then it becomes auspicious and not further entangling. And so, like meeting ourselves where we're at and not being complacent, and then not a spiritual bypass, and not just meeting myself where I'm at, and there's no dynamic urgent advancement. So that's the Varnashram principle.
Mm.
We accept joyfully our psychophysical nature, engage it, yukta vairagya, and engage it under the guidance of a realized spiritual master, and then on that platform of acceptance, we gradually advance. Some verses that could be helpful. There's the verses by Queen Kunti in the 8th chapter of the 1st canto. So she's pure devotee queen, went through terrible hardships, and she's praying to Krishna, please sever the ties of affection that I have for my family members.
Mm.
And her family members were quite exalted personalities, Pandu, Pandavas, Bhishma Dev.
Mm.
But she's praying, even though they're very spiritual family members, but still she's praying, please sever the knot of affection. so that I can, so can be completely free to surrender and serve you. So that's just, it's an area of the Bhagavatam, Queen Kunti's prayers, where she really so directly addresses this discussion.
I personally, I found that, like, from childhood, I don't know, it's in this lifetime, family life sounds so draining. And so, like, that's my experience in this lifetime from the time of childhood. And through Krishna consciousness, what's happened is that finally it becomes like meaningful, or it finally becomes like there is a direction. Otherwise, if there is no direction, what's those relationships are about? I know, like attachment, but even that doesn't seem very fulfilling and missing guidance. And with bhakti yoga, with Krishna consciousness, then finally there is a sense of, oh, I know what it is about, and I know what to do, and I know how to be, and I know what to make out of it. And to me, it seems like a relief, because without that, it seems kind of almost pointless, meaningless, and kind of draining. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, it's gonna, the point gonna come where we're gonna have to like detach and lose each other. And why should I should put so much energy into that already? Like, what's the point, right? And I think many people, like many young people, they feel that, and they sort of like neglect that aspect of their life. And I think somewhat that was like part of my like brahmachari life. I'm like, what's the use of going into family life anyways if we are just not these bodies? But yeah, there is, I can sense some like empowerment that you got by making your family life meaningful, fulfilled right now.
Yeah. Otherwise, like, people try to make meaning out of it, or what gives them direction to know how to be, what to do, and what's a parameter for relationship in what, and it's for each person it becomes different, and then it becomes impossible because there is no guidelines, there is no blueprint.
Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Parampara, did you raise your hand again, or it was already raised?
No, just that was the same one. Hare Krishna.
Well, thank you everybody for this spiritually stimulating questions and discussion and your participation. It was nice to lead the class again after a long time with you all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Rama.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
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 Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Time there.